Well, welcome everybody. We're glad to have everyone here. Um, Tonight we have a very interesting presentation called Postcards, Pulitzers, Easter Hares, and Teddy Bears by Ann Ross. I'm sure that has you wondering exactly what she's going to be talking about. So, Ann, go ahead.
Welcome to my presentation. Some of you may know me as a writer for the now defunct Picture Postcard Collecting magazine. Others might know me as the administrator for the Facebook group Artist Signed Postcards. And still others of you may know me as the United States representative for a German postcard auction company. I've been collecting postcards for maybe about 10 years. And recently, in the last couple years, I got very interested in researching the stories behind the cards. And my background in art history, genealogy, and social work led me to kind of interpret postcards in a way that I was amazed to find was a little bit different than what was common. I got interested in the behind the scenes views of the recipients of the cards, the lives of the artists and publishers that created the cards. And from the get-go, I was trying to introduce art history to postcard collectors to help them interpret postcards like an art historian. The man upstairs seemed to have a different idea because everything that I kept finding was scandals and skullduggery in the postcard world every time I looked something up. And I said, well, okay, this is the direction I'll go in. And some of those articles appeared in Picture Postcard Collecting magazine. This presentation is relatively tame compared to some of the other ones I've given. So I'd like to invite you to follow me down the pun intended, research rabbit hole. And we're going to go on a little bit of a circular journey like the old movie game you might remember from the 80s, The 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, except this one is going to be the 6 Degrees of the Berryman family, examining the connection between postcards, Pulitzer Prizes, Easter hares, and teddy bears. This postcard that you see here on the screen, I bought this card because I liked the German hares. It was a bit beat up, but it was in the dollar box, so I brought it home. I didn't look at the address on the back until I got home, but what I saw sent me right off down that rabbit hole to find out who the recipient was. And here we see the back of the card, Master James Berryman. He lived 1754 Euclid Street in this townhouse community in a posh area called Adams Morgan in Washington, D.C. And he lived with his father, Clifford Berryman, his mother, Kate Berryman, and a sister, Florence. Jack Berryman, as he was known when he was little, was born in June 1902 in Washington, D.C. His father, Cliff, was a cartoonist for the Washington Post. When he received this card, James, or Jack, was 10 years old. And I knew when I saw this address, because I lived in Washington, D.C. for most of the first half of my life, basically, I knew this was a really posh area. So I was very curious about James and his family. After I Googled the address and looked up the house here, which is now unfortunately divided into like 5 or 6 apartments and is worth a lot of money, I learned that the identity of not only Master James, who received this card from his aunt, but his father just blew me away. This card was sent in 1913 by Jack's Aunt Emma. Jack was born in 1902, a few months before his father became famous for drawing a bear. The other thing that I found out that was really interesting is that Master James Berryman, who got this card when he was 13, would grow up to win a Pulitzer Prize. And Jack's father, Cliff, was the Washington Post editorial cartoonist. And I learned that both Cliff and Jack would go on to become Pulitzer Prize winners. and a bear was responsible for the whole generating the whole thing. And I started wondering, okay, how did this all come about? What did the bear have to do with success, and how did it link Jack and Cliff to Postcards? So here we go. But let's take a look at Cliff first. In 1886, Cliff Berryman, Jack's father, moved from his hometown in Kentucky to Washington, D.C. He was only 17 years old. He got a job as a draftsman making technical drawings at the United States Patent Office. So he had a government job when he was only 17 years old. In 1891, the Washington Post hired Cliff as a cartoonist assistant. He worked his way up to editorial cartoonist, a position that he held for many years. And then at one point, he went on to hold the same position at the Washington Star. In November of 1902, this cartoon that you see here made Cliff Berryman famous 5 months after his son Jack was born. And it shows President Teddy Roosevelt and his unfortunate experience when he went bear hunting in Mississippi earlier that year. And after 3 days with no luck, President Roosevelt, he was pretty frustrated. So his guides went and caught an old bear because he couldn't find a healthy bear to kill. They tied the bear to a tree so that Roosevelt could shoot it. But Teddy Roosevelt was a very macho man. He was very proud of his hunting prowess. He refused to shoot the bear. He drew the line at shooting it. Cliff Berryman, being in Washington, D.C. and hooked into all the political stuff that's going on, heard about this and Roosevelt's, hunting failure, and he created this cartoon, and it's called Drawing the Line in Mississippi. And you can see here that Cliff Berryman, this is not a scraggly old bear. This is a little tiny cuddly bear cub. The repercussions of this cartoon were really interesting. At the time, Teddy Roosevelt had an image problem. He was seen by a pretty large section of the public as a bloodthirsty big game hunter. And Cliff's cartoon, which appeared at the top of the page of the newspaper, apparently, helped change Roosevelt's image. But it was also responsible for the invention of the teddy bear and also for the craze for teddy bear postcards. So at this point, I started wondering who made the first teddy bear. So off we go down that journey. This teddy bear that you see in the picture isn't the very first teddy bear that was made. It's a replica that's now in the Smithsonian. In 1902, Morris Mitchum, who was a candy shop owner in Brooklyn, saw Cliff's cartoon of Teddy Roosevelt and the bear cub. His wife, Rose, made a stuffed bear out of fabric scraps. She was quite the skilled seamstress, and making stuffed animals was one of the things that she did, to make ends meet. Rose put the first stuffed bear that she made in their candy shop window with a sign that said Teddy's Bear. Morris Mitchum then wrote Roosevelt to get permission to call her bears that she started to make teddy bears. In February of 1903, they were selling her handmade stuffed bears out of their shop. Unfortunately, none of the early ones survived. Rose actually invented the teddy bear, but unfortunately, historically, her husband really got all the credit for it. By 1907, the Mitchums couldn't keep up with the public demand for teddy bears. Everybody started wanting one. So they formed the Ideal Toy Novelty Company with another company called Butler Brothers, who were makers of plush fabrics. So this teddy bear that you see here, that's in the Smithsonian, is a replica of an Ideal Toy Company teddy bear. Now, since this is a replica, how do we know what the teddy bears, the first ones, really looked like? Contemporary accounts that I found said that Rose's first handmade teddy bears could stand or sit, their jaws could open and shut, but this bear his mouth is firmly shut. He is standing, and you can see he's got joints. Now at this point, postcard artists start to enter the Berryman's story because, as you know, they're very good at following and identifying trends. So here's a little clue. The postcard artist jumped on the teddy bear bandwagon. And here's a Raphael Tuck artist drawn postcard. I don't know who the artist is, that was first published in 1908. It isn't the earliest teddy bear postcard, but it might give us an idea of what Rose's first teddy bears look like. You can see, unlike the Smithsonian replica, this one, his little mouth opens. He can sit. We don't see him standing, but most likely with these broad feet, yes, he could. So this card is one of thousands of teddy bear postcards that were published, and the teddy bear craze obviously coincided with the teddy bear craze and the postcard craze coincided at the same time. So I started wondering, what was the first teddy bear postcard? The craze for teddy bears outlived their namesake. President Roosevelt died in 1919 after being president from 1901 to 1909. And this teddy bear postcard you see here from my collection is Billy Bear by R.F. Outcolt. It's an undivided back, it was copyright in 1903 by Tuck and was first put into use in September of 1904 in England. And you can see right away the resemblance to Cliff Berryman's bear cub, the head, the tilt of the head and the ears. It's very obvious, but it's called Billy. It's not called Teddy. So can we really call this a teddy bear postcard? Purists who collect teddy bears, they consider the real teddy bears with a capital T and a capital B to be the ones made by the Mitchtums and the Ideal Postcard Company. Do we need to get this fussy about it? Well, it depends on your point of view and your attitude, I guess. I consider this a teddy bear postcard, though. If I went and got very into dividing themes among the teddy bear postcards, it would get, relegated to a teddy bear wannabe, I suppose. Now, I don't really know whether this is the first teddy bear postcard in Britain or not, but teddy bear postcards give us an idea just how popular stuffed teddy bears were with children at this time. And here's a postcard that gives us a clue. This one is a 1910 postcard that shows exactly how popular they were with children. You can see here the two children, there's a boy and a girl, and they're pulling and yanking at Santa's robes, and he has a teddy bear here in his arms, and there's a teeny tiny one, I think, in his pack on his back. So it's almost as if they're arguing over who will get the teddy bear for Christmas. And it made me wonder, did Jack ever get a teddy bear for Christmas? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm willing to bet he probably did. So here are some other well-known teddy bear postcards. The way they developed and evolved is kind of interesting. So we've seen the 1904 Billy Bear one, and now we come to, in the middle, in 1906 and 1907, the Roosevelt Bear postcards appeared as a spin-offs of the books that were written by the same names and illustrated by a man named Seymour Eaton, and he used a pen name, Paul Piper. Now, Seymour Eaton is often credited for coining the word teddy bear, but I kind of disagree with that, but each to his own. Also in 1906, the artists for these Roosevelt Bear postcards, even though Seymour Eaton created the original illustrations for the Roosevelt Bear books, for some reason or other, he didn't use his illustrations for the postcards. The artist for the 1906 series was Floyd Campbell, and in 1907, for some reason or other, R.K. Culver was the artist for these postcards. Also in 1906 were these St. John Bears, over here by the artist St. John. They were copyrighted in Chicago by two different publishers, One of them is from my collection is postmarked 1909. Also in 1906, we had Bernard Wall's Little Bears series by the Ullman Manufacturing Company. 1907, we have Fred Lounsbury's Goodbye Teddy. Now, this series of bear postcards was a little bit different because they portrayed Roosevelt as a bear and they were politically oriented. They weren't intended for children. Like a lot of these postcards would appeal to children as well as adults. And then here on the right, you see 1907, Tuck's Little Bears series appeared. Now, I don't know who the artist is. So at this point, I start wondering, did Cliff Berryman ever create a postcard, whether it had a bear on it or not? And here's what I found. It's a little bit different than what I expected. In 1909, Cliff Berryman, Jack's father, designed this postcard that you see. Here's the front and here's the back as a gag gift for Roosevelt after his African game hunting expedition in 1909, which occurred between his 2 terms as president. Now, Berryman, if you can see this here, shows Roosevelt holding up a stinky mongoose. He's shot here, and he's surrounded by all these big game animals. The elephant looks relieved that he's not Roosevelt's target. The monkey is recoiling in horror because mongooses and monkeys were deadly enemies in Africa. And the other game animals have similarly astonished expressions on their faces. The card is addressed to the United States Senate. The back reads, "Every time I shoot anything, I think of you," with Teddy's initials. So it appears that the mongoose is symbolizing the Senate. I'm not too informed about the relationship Teddy Roosevelt had with his Senate, but this is a pretty funny postcard, and it makes me think that apparently Cliff Berryman knew Roosevelt fairly well to send something like this, to create something like this for him. But I started wondering, when I started looking at the back, was this ever mailed? Is it the whole thing a dummy postcard? And the clue seems to be in the stamp. The stamp is this wonky looking cartoon monkey, and it says Mombasa on the top. Cancellation is very, very clear, and everybody who collects postcards knows that a lot of postcards do not come out with cancellations that are this clear. And I started wondering, did Roosevelt write the message on the back and mail it himself? Was this postcard ever really sent through the mail? Everybody has their own opinion, I'm sure, but I'm kind of leaning towards the opinion that the whole thing was a gag. That Cliff Berryman created the whole postcard himself. So I'm wondering, did he create any postcards for his son? Hand-drawn postcards for his son. So here we come back to the original postcard. I don't know whether Cliff Berryman created a postcard for his son. In March 1913, when Jack was 10 years old and got this postcard, obviously teddy bears were still flying off the shelves. At this time, Jack was showing some artistic ability. His parents luckily encouraged him. Not all postcard artists were so lucky to have their parents encourage their talent. And in this same year that Jack got this postcard, his father, Cliff, was celebrating the publication of his first book illustrations in a children's book called Raggedy, His Life and Adventures, which is a book about a little dog. Now, as Jack grew up, he decided he'd rather be called Jim. He followed in his father's footsteps as an artist, and here he is when he was a young man. In the 1920s, Jack, now called Jim, attended George Washington University in DC and the Corcoran School of Art, which is still a very prestigious art school in DC. His first job was as a sports cartoonist for a little paper in Venice, Florida. Later, like his father, Jim joined the staff at the Washington Star. when his father was the lead editorial cartoonist and his mother worked there as well as an art critic. Jim Berryman's first job at the paper was working in the advertising department as a commercial illustrator, sketching clothes and things like that for advertisements. In 1935, Cliff Berryman, Jack's father, had a stroke while working on a cartoon, and the Washington Star called Jim in to finish his father's cartoon, which must have been a little bit difficult and emotional for him. But that's how Jim Berryman became an editorial cartoonist for the Washington Star, just like his father. And in 1944, Cliff Berryman won the Nobel Prize for editorial cartooning with his sketch that shows FDR, and I'm not sure who all these people are. They may be members of his cabinet, and they were working on figuring out a decision what to do to mobilize manpower for World War II, to recruit soldiers. So in this period, after he won the Nobel Prize, Cliff Berryman became known as the Dean of American Editorial Cartoonists. And also beginning in this period of the 40s, Cliff and Jim both created menu cards and invitations with sketches and whatnot on them for their family and friends. But I don't know if they created postcards as well. Most likely they may have, at least they certainly sent them back and forth. And there are postcards in certain archives of the Berryman papers in various different institutions and universities, and I'll get into that in just a minute. In 1949, Clifford Berryman died, and many, many newspapers carried his obituary. He was very famous. He was basically a celebrity in the 30s and 40s. His son carried on his legacy. And in 1950, Jim Berryman won the Pulitzer Prize for this McCarthy-era cartoon that you see here, all set for a super secret session in Washington with all the press, radio, and TV paraphernalia, but no one to speak. This was the crowning achievement of his career. Cliff and Jim Berryman are the only father and son to win Pulitzer Prizes in the same category of editorial cartoons. But even though Jim won the Pulitzer Prize, he never reached the celebrity status that his father did. Both men also published books of their political cartoons that were created during certain presidential campaigns. The Berrymans' diaries, sketches, letters, and some postcards from the World's Fair in 1939 were donated by Jim's wife and his sister to several different organizations, the Smithsonian Institution, the University of Wyoming, and the National Archives. So I was wondering, why wasn't my postcard donated along with the other papers? How did it get in that box at the Arcadia Postcard Show? Obviously, a little card written by, Jack's aunt wasn't important enough to save, but I'm glad that I got attracted to those little German Easter hares and took it home with me. And that particular postcard has spurred in me an interest to collect cards that specifically have interesting addresses, interesting messages on the back. So that card basically taught me to always look at the back of the card as well as the front. Now, if you're wondering where you can go to see both Berryman's cartoons and to read more about them, here's my resource page with the two books that they wrote, The Campaign of 48, The Campaign of 56. And then there's a visual history that combines both of their cartoons in one book. The Library of Congress's website has digitized images of their cartoons. You can even download them for free. The National Archives has in their special collection political cartoons by Cliff Berryman. Jim's other papers are in the University of Wyoming's American Heritage Center. And the Smithsonian Institution has a really interesting archive sketchbooks, diaries, newspaper clippings, and letters. And you can go through the scrapbooks online and see the letters and sketches and whatnot that the Berryman family pasted in these scrapbooks, which is really interesting. Unfortunately, I didn't see any postcards in any of them. And then there's also some greeting cards illustrated by Cliff and Jim Berryman in those scrapbooks. But again, I don't know. You know, I'd have to go down there and look, you know, or send an email, an inquiry about it. And the last place that I found information was a Theodore Roosevelt Center digital library, where I found the image of Cliff Berryman's postcard about Theodore Roosevelt's interesting experience out bear hunting that sparked all of this, the teddy bear postcards, the teddy bears themselves. So this was my first exploration of the world behind postcards and how they were created and what was created out of them. So I hope you enjoyed this as much as I have. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Another thing about Roosevelt, he loved to blow stuff away. The American Museum of Natural History in New York City, in their African Hall, a lot of the animals, he donated them to the museum for their exhibits.
He had shot and had stuffed.
They were stuffed. The other person who donated a lot was Rochester's own George Eastman, who also had a bit of bloodlust in him when he wasn't working on photography. And I don't know if they knew each other, but they certainly shared an interest.
Okay.
And I just sent my husband upstairs to look for one of my albums, and I have 2, 4, 6 cards that might be Berryman. I don't know if anyone can see. A
little bit.
These are copies, I believe, done in the 70s, but they look very much like, they look like
his work.
The one that you showed us earlier. I don't know if you can see.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm no expert on them, but it does have a bear in it, doesn't it?
Oh, they're all bears. Here again, I'm trying to see what I'm showing you.
Okay. Yeah, I see. Okay. Oh, I haven't ever seen that before. That's really interesting. And I know that Cliff Berryman, and I didn't put this in my presentation, but for a time when he was making his cartoons, he would put a little bear like in the corner. So it kind of became his trademark.
Yeah, I can't, unfortunately, there's no signature nor any notation on the back of the card.
I guess you'd have to do like a Google image search, although that sometimes doesn't help.
Well,
that might turn up some results. I don't know. Yeah, this was a little bit different than my other presentation about Hugo Tuck with all the scandal and whatnot in it. But yeah, I go where my curiosity takes me, basically, when I'm doing the research.
I think that many of the bears are really stiff, the high-end German stuffed animals, rather than the ones made in the Brooklyn kitchen.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions that you can't really answer at this point, unless we, get a time machine and go back in time.
Hey, Ann, it's Ashley Aarons. I just wanted to say thanks for another interesting presentation. Hey, yeah, I loved your Hugo Tuck presentation, and this one was very interesting too. It's
okay, good.
Great that you have such research skills, and I appreciate you going in directions that, frankly, I wouldn't have thought to go. That's one of the reasons I love postcards, is they can take you so many ways. So
yes, I do too. It's wonderful. And at first I thought, well, this is a little bit going off topic, and then I said, well, what the heck? This is where the rabbit hole took me. So let's go with it.
Yeah, I have a very scarce hotel card with a teddy bear connection from the. Not sure if you can see that.
No, I
can't see anything.
Oh, I can see a little bit. Children with a teddy bear?
Yeah, so it's the teddy bear cave at the Hotel Roosevelt.
Oh, cool. Oh,
for the
I've never seen it.
for the
Wow.
entertainment of younger guests.
Oh, cool. Teddy
Mhm.
Bear Cave.
Yeah. So it's from the early 1930s, just at the beginning of the I think the first company that ran the hotel, the United
Oh,
Hotel Company.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank
so it's a
you for sharing that.
wonderful card.
Wow, that's wonderful. Great. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I want to thank you, Anne, because it was really lovely. It was fun.
Thank you. That's what I like. I like to make it fun and, just go where it takes me,
Yeah.
And I always want people to have fun and, there's this area where having fun and being entertained and learning stuff coincides. And I kind of live in that little area.
It was quite a journey.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, really was.
So
Yeah.
does your rabbit hole that you go down have just a slide, or is it a circular slide?
I'm
You know,
not
like
sure.
around a pole?
Oh, I'm not sure how to answer that. I kind of visualize it as being circular, like a whole hole. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I just saw. So
Yes. Yeah. And I grew up with a lot of different kinds of animals. So, and I grew up with, my mother was a children's librarian. My father, besides working for the federal government, he was a book collector and he collected illustrated books. So I grew up with Thornton Burgess's books. They were illustrated by Harrison Cady and Old Mother Westwind and Beatrix Potter and all these beautifully illustrated children's books. And I think that's where a lot of my interest in a lot of these artist signed postcards comes from, is how I was brought up with all these beautiful books.
Back to your Roosevelt Bears, the postcards.
Sure.
It had 1 through 16, and then 17 through, I guess it's 24, no, 32.
Uh-huh.
They were also in books. There were
Okay.
4 books that Eaton wrote, and they were
Right.
the plates that were inside those. And I
Yeah.
can't remember the first 2. I think it's Travels and then Detective and then Overseas.
Mhm.
So beyond the 32 postcards, they go overseas. They go to Scotland and England and Canada and
Wow.
different places. Right,
Okay.
Susan?
Okay, I'm looking for there are 4 sets of Roosevelt Bears, and you name 2 of them. Then there's a set of 4 of the patriotic ones, and then the last set, the most difficult to get, are the foreign ones, the Scotland, Canada, and so forth. And I think I have only 2 of them, so I'm on the hunt.
Ah,
They also, there was another series of books, and they were the books you talked about were the big, thick gray books that had the plates in.
yes.
But there were also several white, thinner books. I don't even read, but there was only 1 or 2 plates in those.
Hmm.
And I have only ever seen a couple of them out, but I never bought any. But,
Well, I'll look
yes,
at
and the
more.
overseas, and you're right, there was Uncle Sam. There's at least 2 postcards
When the Roosevelt Bears go
from
to
the Roosevelt
Washington
Bears, yes.
with Uncle
Yes.
Sam in. Okay, that would make sense.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think somewhere I have an old,
there you go with
yes. And I
that's
always,
17 or 18.
I always wondered, why didn't he use his own illustrations? I don't know. And I haven't seen the actual books. I need to look them up online enough to kind of compare the illustrations with the original
Well, the
illustration.
illustrations from the books match the postcards.
Do they?
Yes.
Isn't that interesting? Because the
Yes.
information I have says that he had 2 other artists that illustrated them. That's curious. So maybe they just copied his work. I don't know the answer to that. That's
But Susan, you did well. If you could just send your husband to find him, you did a real good job.
My books aren't labeled for him, they're labeled for me. He had a hard time finding them, but I knew where it was. they're treasures, especially now that I found the foreign ones so difficult to find.
Wow.
I almost don't want to find them all because the hunt goes on
Mhm.
until I get them. And once I get them, well, maybe I don't pay enough attention. There's one I have here, and I'm not sure. It's the Roosevelt Bears Return from Abroad. I think that's also part of the
From the books, yes.
from the this book.
Oh, yeah, that's a nice one. That's a nice one.
And then they were also reproduced.
Right. Yeah, in I think
I don't think, yes, and I can't tell you which press did it, but someone,
1964 and then again in 1980 something or other, 86
Yes.
or something around in there. Yeah.
yes, very nice, enjoyed it.
Oh, I'm glad I hit a topic where people actually had, you know, more information and you actually have some of the cards. So that's neat. That makes me happy.
Yeah, we don't all collect the same thing, but if we
Oh,
listen carefully, there's just so much information to get from the next person to
Yeah.
your right, to your left, across the table from you.
Yeah.
And fortunately on Zoom now. So I thank you for your research and for your complete talk.
Yeah, somewhere I have an old postcard magazine. Is it the American Postcard Journal? I think it has a checklist of the Roosevelt Bears in it, but I should have looked that up before I got on here. But yeah, I hadn't realized it. You said there were 34 of them, I think. Is that right?
The first set is one to number 17, 18,
I think there were a lot more of them than I'm aware of.
27, 28, 29, 30. I'm going. And as I mentioned, Susan Nicholson did a book, 31, 32. There are 32 in the first set.
Oh, wow.
And then they repeat the numbers in the patriotic set.
Mm-hmm.
And well, come visit. What can I tell you? I know where the book is.
Car, did you want to show your postcard there with the bear that you held up before? You're muted.
The
Car, red roses?
That's who was holding a card up. Somebody was holding a card
Yeah,
up.
you're muted
What-
though.
the patriotic ones? Wait.
No, it was a white card.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
sound check. Hello?
That,
There you go. We can hear you.
okay. That
Yeah.
was me. And
Put up.
Okay, cool.
there
Hi.
we-
And what did you find?
Hold up your card.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Look who's there. Karen, hi Karen. Okay, here's.
Yeah. How you doing, Susan?
Oh, terrific. Oh, you've got your own bear. Yes.
Embossed. Is that embossed?
Oh, I can't.
Yeah, you guys hear me okay, right?
Yes, I can
Yes.
hear.
All right, cool. I'm just gonna talk about these real quick.
Oh, shit, please do.
Both of them are postally used and they've been in my collection now for about 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I have two big fat binders full of heavily embossed airbrushed cards of different types.
Mm-hmm.
These are my only two with teddy bears.
Oh.
But when I saw the topic tonight, I jumped in thinking, oh, Easter, I love Easter cards. And,
Oh, that
it
was a
turned
little
out the
misleading.
subject was bears, and I learned something.
Yeah, that was a
Oh
little.
no, it was wonderful. It brought me in. And I also really enjoyed your one about the Tuck brother. That was actually my second ever meeting with this club.
Wow.
This one, it's a vertical card and it's a horizontal screen. So I'm just going to do that so you get a nice and close up. He still has a little bit of his green and brown tint, or it could have been red, white, and blue at one point. You know, the colors on these suckers fade, but he's got his walking with a big stick and he's Teddy B, no mistaking who that is. And it's postmarked 1908.
Oh, neat.
The other one with the three bears, that's 1907.
Great. Thank you.
And
it looks like it was just the one color.
Uh-huh.
and keep looking and find the Santa Claus bear like that. With your-
Ooh.
Yes.
Thank you.
No.
Anyway, love the club. I'm going to put myself back on mute because I have a very loud fan in the room and I don't want it buzzing in your ear.
All right, thank you for showing that. Well, thank you very much, Ann. Thank you. That was really good. Very interesting.